Hello, Northglenn. I am Mayor Meredith Leighty. Thank you for joining us this evening. Our main focus tonight will be a discussion on the recommendations of the recent 360 assessment of our police department. However, I would like to remind everyone that this is a time to hear from our community. So if you have questions about other current issues like COVID-19, we will do our best to address those as well. If this is your first time joining us, here's an overview of the format. We typically talk for a few minutes as calls go out. Once we have everyone on the line, we make opening statements about the topic. Then we take a few questions via phone and online. If you are on the phone and want to ask a question, simply hit *3. If you are listening to the live stream online, there is an area to type a question. Tonight, there are 5 of us to share information and take questions. In addition to myself, we have City Manager Heather Geyer.
Hello.
Police Chief Jim May.
Hello.
Commander Heidi Waltz.
Good evening.
And Mitch Weinzettel with BerryDunn. Mitch, you're going to have to help me with your last name. BerryDunn is a consulting...
Hello.
Oh, hi. BerryDunn is a consulting firm that conducted the Police Department 360 assessment. And I believe we have one of your colleagues as well, Mitch.
We do. Fred Fletcher is also on the line.
Glad to be here.
Hi, Fred. Thank you for calling in. So, City Manager Geyer, as we wait for our callers to settle in, do you have some things you'd like to share with us?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Leighty. Tonight's focus is on our Police Department Operations and Staffing Assessment by BerryDunn. Right now, there's a national conversation about law enforcement and race and equity. I feel this 360 assessment could not have come at a better time. However, I want to stress that we put this assessment in motion several months ago, seeking objective input on ways we could improve. We ultimately want to construct a solid strategic plan for the police department moving forward and eventually seek national police accreditation. This is one of the first comprehensive outside evaluations of our police department that we have ever undergone. Agencies seeking accreditation go through similar processes to gain and keep that accreditation. This process is a starting point. We'll be able to look at these recommendations along with our community and build a police department strategic plan that not only strives to achieve industry best practices, but really embraces input from our residents.
Thank you, City Manager. So, back in September, when City Council approved seeking an outside consultant to conduct the 360 assessment of our police department, we all felt like it was an opportunity to hear an objective perspective. So we know that things have shifted and changed in our community, nationally as well. And so City Council is also working on other ways to engage our community on issues of race and equity. Our new Diversity, Inclusivity, and Social Equity Board was approved by Council recently, and we are moving forward with that. And a citizen committee to work with our police department is still in the works. I think we have a fair number of callers on the line, so let's get to our main topic. Again, we have City Manager Geyer, Chief May, Commander Waltz, and we have members from the BerryDunn consulting firm with us, Mitch and Fred, and myself, and we are here to talk to you about our Police Department 360 assessment. Chief and Mitch, would you like to make some opening statements, then take questions? Listeners, just press *3 to ask a question on the phone or type in your question if you're online listening to the audio stream. So Chief or Mitch, I don't know who wants to go first.
Chief, you want to go?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I just want to say actually thank you to my staff. It's been last fall we started this process, and then we kicked it off in January. They worked very hard getting all the information, working with BerryDunn and Associates, and we really appreciate the report and how it is. It's one of those things where you take a look at yourselves in a mirror and again trying to get us to that next level of policing. So again, thanks to my staff, thanks for the community, for participating in a lot of those committees, and we look forward to sitting down and moving forward.
Great. Mitch, would you like to add anything?
Sure. Let me just start out with a couple of comments. First of all, I want to echo what the chief mentioned. We had a lot of involvement. Certainly a lot of work went into this. We engaged a lot of people from the community, government officials, police department staff, et cetera, and everyone was extremely forthcoming and helpful and really helped us produce what we think is a fair and objective report about the police department. I want to just mention a couple of things, just a clarification. In the original report that we published, we said there were 41 recommendations, and somebody, probably yours truly, couldn't count correctly. There's actually 45. I want to mention, and we did post an updated version of the report that reflects that correct number. But I do want to mention, and just take a minute, and I know, Council, that we talked about this during the presentation about a week ago, but there might be some who look at that number and are somewhat astonished by the size of it and think it's a huge number. And I just want to assure folks in Northglenn, that's a very typical number that we find when we do these studies nationally. It's not an indication of a poorly run or poorly functioning police department. It's an indication of a department that has some opportunities to improve in various areas. And again, many of the recommendations that we find or that we found in Northglenn, we find in a lot of our other studies. So certainly we don't want to give people the impression that the department's in a poor state. Really, that's not true. We found many, many positive things about the department, and certainly there are lots of things to be proud of for you as a community with your police department. The other thing I wanted to just mention briefly, and City Manager Geyer mentioned this as well, part of our initiative with the city involves helping the police department and city develop a strategic plan for the police department. So where we are right now in this process, we've finished the primary report, but the next step for us and for the city is to start talking about how do we take the recommendations and turn those into actions on the police department side. Obviously, there's been a lot of time and effort that's gone into producing this report, and certainly what we want it to do then is to result in positive change and growth for the department that benefits the community. So we are already scheduled to do that, and we'll be doing that over the next 4 to 6 weeks most likely, and there will be additional discussions with council and city staff and the police department as we go forward. So again, we really appreciate the opportunity to have worked with the police department thus far, and certainly also look forward to helping move some of those initiatives. So with that, I'll finish and we can take questions.
Thank you very much. So I just want to remind all of the callers that if you are on the phone and would like to ask a question, you press *3. And then if you're online, you can just type your question in. So thank you for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started with some callers. All right, so it looks like we have Gerald Montour on the line. Hello, how are you?
I am doing fine. How is everybody?
Excellent. Thanks for calling in. What's your question?
I have a couple, actually. My first one is, what was the reasoning behind of not having any people of color, only one woman, and no one representing the LGBTQ community in the 360 review? And how is that addressing the systematic racism within the Northglenn Police Department?
Hi, Gerald. It's City Manager Geyer. I'm happy to answer that question for you. So the city put out a request for proposal, and within that document, it's a formal purchasing document. It was an invitation for companies across the nation to bid on this project. So I believe we received 7 or 8 proposals, and the proposals we received varied in terms of the size of company and experience, as well as the individuals that would be serving as a project management team for this effort. And so through a competitive purchasing process, we narrowed the list of top firms that submitted proposals, and that was based on experience, qualifications, and then interviewed the top firms and then made a selection in terms of an overall recommendation to City Council. We recommended BerryDunn because of their experience in law enforcement in terms of the project team they put forward, both Mitch and Fred. Additionally, BerryDunn offered something that several of the firms did not offer, which was the emphasis and experience in data management. BerryDunn is an accounting firm, and so they have a proven track record, which is different than other firms that bid on the project. So in terms of the internal project team, Commander Waltz served as the lead project manager. I, obviously a city manager, have been involved in the project every step of the way, along with Chief May and commanders on his command staff. Additionally, we, as part of this project, have really touched pretty much every aspect of the department from a unit perspective in terms of, and Fred and Mitch can talk more about this in a minute, in terms of the one-on-one interviews and group interviews that they did with staff within the department. So the scope was not drafted that requesting that this project be led by a person of color. So as the city has had conversations over the last couple of months in particular, we have several efforts underway. The mayor mentioned the Diversity, Inclusivity, and Social Equity Board, and then the other piece that I'll mention is internally, staff will be undergoing training along with council, but the real heavy lift that we need to do is development of a social equity tool. And so we have partnered with the Government Alliance on Race and Equity as of last fall. They are known as GARE. And if you watch the City Council meeting Monday night, Roberto Montoya is our regional director, and he's been our point of contact to help guide us as we walk down this path of first learning about what systemic racism is, what our role is in that, making sure that we provide the appropriate diversity training for council, that I do that for all staff. It'll be a mandatory training that I hope to have put in place in the fall of this year. And really the work that needs to be, the work is going to need to be identified. So I've outlined specific steps that we're taking, but as we go down this path and setting up the diversity board, we're going to identify what else needs to happen on our journey. And ultimately, our goal is to advance racial equity in the city of Northglenn and really reinforce and be true to the council's strategic priority to be a diverse and welcoming community. So I'll turn it over to Mitch and Fred if you want to talk more specifically about the interviews that you held with staff within the department and outreach to the community.
Sure.
Yes,
Thanks, Heather.
go ahead.
I'll be happy to talk about that. I mean, just a few pieces on this. First of all, as Heather mentioned, we had broad, diverse participation within the police department. The full diversity of staff was involved in, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 interviews that we did. Obviously, we interviewed people on the council. We also held 2 separate community forums, and those were open to the public. We also had an online reporting mechanism that was open to the public and advertised. And so a lot of these pieces were in place to really, our point always is to be as inclusive as possible. Certainly our team from an outsider, from an outside view does not look diverse, at least on its surface, but I will assure you that both Fred and I have significant experience dealing with diverse issues, and certainly I think another factor here that comes into play is that this environment really kind of changed as things occurred really toward the tail end of this project. And I think we've had some conversations with the police department and with staff at the city. Had this study been starting now, perhaps some things would have been a little differently, done a little differently. And I could just say that Fred, in addition to just some general background and work that he's done as a police chief, is also an expert on gender bias issues and diversity, and we look at those issues very specifically, and did look at those issues not only internally, but we looked for examples of concerns about that type of about diversity issues with the city. So again, we feel like we did our best to uncover those rocks, but we also recognize that the circumstances at this point, the environment, the landscape is very much in flux. Fred, did you have anything you want to add?
No, that covered it, Mitch.
Thanks.
Gerald, did we answer your question, or did you have a follow-up question?
For all of that, but it didn't answer the question. And it also didn't address the systematic racism within the police force, because I've just recently was a victim of that. I have had racial crimes at my home, and the Northglenn Police Department failed to see that. So how is that also being addressed either by the city manager or the mayor?
So, Gerald, thank you for calling in and for raising this concern again. So we are working as a team to address that issue, and as you know, I know you've worked with Chief May and our staff on this specific issue, and also, I believe, the district attorney's office. Is that correct?
No, district attorney has never returned my call. I finally talked to somebody from DOJ today and from the FBI, and they were going to get me in touch with a district attorney. Then late today on my work phone number, I received a call from a DA, and she left a message. Last name is Fritz, I think it is. I have not talked to anyone in regards to this case from the DA's office. I was also waiting a call back from you, Heather. You were going to call me back also. I haven't seen that call either.
Correct. I know I got your email this afternoon, Gerald, and saw that you and Rosa had connected from Department of Justice. So we just need to find a time. Rosa was going to provide some potential dates to do a forum here in Northglenn. So I'm awaiting those dates, and then I think the three of us can connect, and then we'll get information out to the community about that possible event.
But I think your call, Heather, was addressing the issues of the case not being fully investigated, the person on the motorcycle that was never investigated, the people that cased my house that were never investigated, and the fact that this gentleman burned my flags after taking them. So you were going to address the chief and the detectives on that and return a call to me, and that never happened.
Yes. So I'm going to turn it over to Chief May, and we'll go ahead and just, if you have time to stay on the line, we can talk through those pieces right now.
Gerald, as we talked this afternoon.
Yeah, I'd like to continue the conversation online with everybody, with the community involved.
Great, thank you.
Yep, Gerald, as we talked today, some of the things that I said that we would do, but the fact that Native American flags are stolen does not alone meet the statutory requirements of a bias-motivated crime. There is not sufficient evidence that the crimes in this incident were committed with the intention to harass or intimidate the victims because of the actual or perceived race, color, ancestry, or national origin. While the actions by the suspect may be hurtful and offensive, to you and your wife. They do not violate criminal law, therefore cannot be charged as such. During our investigation, the motive of the suspect was he felt you were flying the American flag upside down, and that was his motive in his interrogation of why he took the flags. At no time during the video he did any racial slurs to you or your family. You weren't even there that day. You did see it on your ring. My detectives and my officer, I feel they did their duty. They did try to get some more information. Again, the suspect fully admitted to his actions. And again, on the destruction, that was after the fact when he got the flags back. But again, we cannot prove that he did it because of your ancestral heritage. So at this time, some of the information that you provided today, again, I ask you to outline that for me. It's already in the district attorney's office. I'll provide that letter to them. But at this time, and again, it's not what you believe. That's not the part of the case we have to prove because you do believe that they're racially motivated. We have to go on the mental culpability of the suspect. So, and at that knowingly and intent crime, that's what we have to prove, that he was intentionally trying to do that because of your race, color, ancestry, or national origin. So at that time, that's why we charge theft and criminal mischief.
And Chief May, you had told me the reason why it was because my flags were furled and that he had not seen them or didn't know what they were, but he had admitted driving by my house on a daily basis. So which means he was seeing my flags in multiple times, and he had to have seen them when he burned them. So the idea that he didn't know what the flags were doesn't fly. The other part is the Northglenn Police Department failed to do their job and investigate the gentleman on the motorcycle. They don't even know who he is. Failed to investigate the gentleman on the pedal bike that cased my house prior to this happening. The Northglenn Police Department failed to investigate the flying of the Confederate flag in front of my house prior to this happening. So the Northglenn Police Department failed to do their job and now sewed the case up in 30 minutes, charged him by phone, which is an unheard of type of technique. I guess, according to you, Northglenn Police Department does that frequently. And I asked you for some type of documentation showing that. But
well, again, there's two professionals on the phone that again, phone interviews are not uncommon. But if there's a different take from Mitch or Fred, who's on the phone too, who has a lot of experience on this side too, you can ask them as well if it's uncommon.
Okay, but within a case of this magnitude, where this happened, and the incident was a request for ethnic intimidation and racial crimes, the Northglenn Police Department didn't do that. They also didn't consult a district attorney that was a felony type or county type of district attorney. They had an interview with a municipal district attorney that was only a misdemeanor cases that he tried. So to go from he was stricken with grief because his friend had died, was a veteran, and my flag was upside down, to it was a holiday, to the flags were furled, to he's a God-fearing man and he only did this because it was the holiday. The Northglenn Police Department failed to interview him personally and in person, knowing that his reasons and excuses and alibi changed multiple times. And
Gerald, I'll disagree with you on that. I don't think it changed that much.
But Chief, you also told me that your police department did a great job. I told you they only took 30 minutes. You said you stand behind them. They did a great job, which is a great sign of systematic racism within the police force. I've also asked prior to be part of an oversight committee for the Northglenn Police Department, and I've gotten one email from Renee in regards to that, and no other information. So,
Daryl, this is City Manager Geyer. Can I interject just real quick?
Sure.
On the Police Oversight Committee, that hasn't been formally organized yet, and that's why you received the one email from Renee indicating that she CC'd me on that email. That topic is coming back to council on August 12th. We're having a study session where we'll present potential options to City Council, so that effort is moving forward, just like the Diversity, Inclusivity, and Social Equity Board. So that will be forthcoming, and we'll provide you with that information. We need to move on in the program tonight, and I know we need to continue our conversations with you in regards to the incident, and we're committed to doing that. And so if it's okay with you, if we move on to the next caller, so that way we can make sure everybody has an opportunity. But I appreciate you sharing openly tonight, and I hear your perspectives, and we'll continue our conversation and see how we can move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We're moving on to the next caller. We have Sampson in just a minute. Sampson, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, what is your question?
So I just had a quick question. So the city of Northglenn has banned the use of people in fireworks, and it's been like that for a little while. I just want to know if there's ever going to be any sort of change on that, because I feel that regardless of how many times people come out and police say, hey, fireworks are illegal, don't light them off. But if you do, you can have your neighbors call and, have an officer dispatched. Rather than having officers dispatched for people lighting off fireworks in Northglenn, can there be something in place where people can light off fireworks, and rather than Northglenn just patrolling the streets, the neighborhoods, they can set up DUI checkpoints or something like that that is more easily caught for, dangerous activity rather than, fireworks?
Thank you for the question. It's an interesting suggestion that you have. This is City Manager Geyer on providing a space and place for individuals to light off fireworks. Fireworks has been a long-standing issue in our community, and last fall, you may be aware, and the Connection newsletter for August is going to include statistics and data on the city's response to illegal fireworks usage over the 4th of July holiday. The department issued 61 summonses for illegal fireworks use, and received well over, 250 complaints, calls for service over, I think just on the 4th of July, wasn't it, Commander Waltz? So, we're trying to be creative and strategic in terms of being responsive to the community and the complaints that we get on illegal firework usage. I certainly believe that not being able to, due to COVID-19, have professional fireworks show increased the amount of use of fireworks within neighborhoods. And so that definitely impacted our ability to be as responsive as we had hoped to be. But overall, I think we were very responsive. City Council last year approved an ordinance, a local ordinance that we previously did not have in the city, implementing a mandatory minimum fine of $1,000 for the first offense, and then a corresponding increase in the fine amount for other offenses. And so it's at this point, I haven't received any type of direction from council to do otherwise. So I appreciate your comments and really, hopefully that. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, by no means am I against fireworks. I absolutely love fireworks. I see the signs, in my neighborhood. Hey, PTSD, TBI. I'm a combat vet myself. My neighbors light off fireworks, and I'm completely fine with it. I feel that the reason why there's an influx of phone calls on 4th of July is because people are told that they're not allowed to do it. And so, of course, you tell people who want to light off fireworks that they're not allowed to light off fireworks when they can drive 45 minutes into Wyoming, get them, and come home. I feel that if people weren't told, hey, you're not allowed to light off fireworks, or hey, there's going to be a fine, I don't think you guys would have as many phone calls throughout the entire day of people complaining about fireworks, because it's not something that is not allowed at that point. If it was allowed, then people wouldn't be calling, complaining throughout the whole day of the 4th of July.
I hear the feedback that you're sharing, and what's challenging with this topic is fireworks are illegal in the state of Colorado, but what we're finding is communities enforce it differently, and Northglenn has been very proactive in our enforcement, which, so I don't know what the right answer is, other than as manager, I believe we did the right thing this year in terms of our enforcement approach by the police department, but is very staff intensive. And, we're going to have to look at what we can do next year. We did not have our 4th of July festival at E.B. Raines Park this year due to COVID-19, and hopefully we'll be able to have a professional fireworks show next year, and things will calm down, and we'll get greater compliance.
Okay.
Thanks for calling in. Okay, we're going to move on to Joanne Sandoval. Joanne, are you with us?
I am.
Hi, what is your question?
Well, my initial question was to the chief, and based on the assessment that was completed, what he thought the biggest priority for the police department was. However, after listening, I have a bigger concern that you need to be trained and taught what systemic racism is. And I think that, to me, is shocking that you don't know what it is. The caller with his flags that were burned, it was the systemic racism that you guys don't know what it is. He has a perfect case there, and the police department doesn't know what it is. You all admit it. You don't know what it is. You need to be trained on what it is. So I'm so upset. I'm shaking. I don't know where to go from here. I've lived here for 30 years, and this is just stunning to me that you don't know what systemic racism is.
May I do a brief recap?
Chief, what's your biggest opportunity now?
Well, again, I think that's one of the things, working with the community and being transparent and open, looking at the case. And again, you haven't seen the case and the evidence that came through and the statute that guides us. But with that, I've been, working with, the victim on this too, and trying to, he's other things. And right now the district attorney has that case. And again, if there's more evidence that comes forward that, that we can actually prove that, they can add that charge. So again, we're doing quite a bit. We've, went through some anti-bias, training just recently. We do that. We have other de-escalation training that we've done, but we're doing more of it. And again, with the Department of Justice, they reached out to us. I've talked to her, doing some, other training. So again, in our country right now, this is a huge topic, and we want to make sure that that we're a part of the conversation with our community and work together to provide. But again, with this study, BerryDunn looked at our use of force complaints and everything, through that, and they can talk on this. But again, they did not find any signs of bias-based policing in that study. But the other thing that I want to look at too is this opportunities for us, again, having eyes looking at our department on best practices is super important. I think one of the big opportunities for us is the restructuring of command so we're more efficient and effective. Again, we have a very young department, so training is going to be critical.
I would like to, my name is Diana Wilson.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead, Mitch.
Oh.
I don't think it's worth it anymore.
If I could just jump in for a second, Joanne, appreciate the question and I appreciate the comment. And you know, I'm not going to get into details on this particular case, but I will say this: one of the things that has emerged from the more recent events in the last couple of months is a renewed push to really increase community involvement multifold in terms of being more collaborative with the police department. And the issues of systemic racism, biased policing, implicit bias, and those things are on the forefront today, maybe perhaps more than they ever have been. And I will say that part of our effort, and we have suggested and spoke with the police department about a model to move forward that substantially changes the community collaboration, and we continue to have conversations with city council and city manager and the police department about those things, really to get at the heart of the pieces that you're talking about, and how do we as a profession, and this isn't exclusive to Northglenn, but how do we as a profession in policing take steps to root out and eliminate, do our best to take away the biases that may be present in the things that we do or in the systems that are in front of us that create outcomes that really are unintended but certainly marginalize certain populations. So I just want you to know that this is a focus of discussion in many categories and across the entire city and with the police department, and it's an area that we've, our firm, BerryDunn, has provided a model for reform that we think would be beneficial to the community.
If I can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
Hello? You know, the gentleman who was on earlier talking about the issues that he has with the police department and their failure, in his opinion, to address his issues was really not the focus of my discontent, I guess, because my initial question was to the chief about what he thought the biggest opportunity is for the city of Northglenn Police Department. But after listening to him and then hearing one of the commentators, I don't remember who exactly said that on the face, there's not an issue in the Northglenn Police Department. I don't remember the exact words because I was so taken aback by it. It's like it's there, but it's not here. We don't have the problem here on the face of it. So it's scary when you're out here living in Northglenn, and I'm a minority, and I've suffered, you know, systemic racism in my lifetime, a lot. And so to hear these words, it's frightening. Northglenn is a small town. We are not a metropolis here. We should not be,
Joanne,
our police officers should not be seen as somebody to be feared, but somebody to be revered. And this is unfortunate
absolutely.
for us.
And I will tell you, we agree. And I don't know if you had an opportunity to read the report. I know it's very lengthy, but we spoke about that very thing within the report and the need for communities to have complete trust and confidence in their police departments. And first of all, I'm sorry that you've had those experiences, and I can't put myself in that direct position. What I can tell you is that part of our job is to help organizations like the Northglenn Police Department talk about these things openly and connect with people who've had some of those experiences so that we become more aware and more learned. And we can then take that information and turn it back toward the systems and processes that we use and say, what kind of consequences, what kind of unintended outcomes are we creating based on the ways that we do or don't do things within the way we approach public safety. So I want you to know that you're being heard, and when I say you, I mean persons of color and marginalized people around the country are being heard, and there are people like the folks in Northglenn that are truly interested in closing that gap. And so, for as much as I know you are expressing frustration, and I can appreciate that, I want you to know that everything we're hearing from the city side is a direct and intentional effort to work with the community to again, to root out those issues and problems and make positive steps, and ultimately, hopefully, so that everybody has a better level of trust and confidence. So we certainly are continuing to partner with the city in that regard, and we certainly have high hopes for moving forward as a city and with the police department.
Well, I appreciate your comments, and I hope that my city learns what systemic racism means.
Okay, thanks for calling, Joanne. We're going to move to our next caller. We have David on the line. David, are you there?
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, David. What is your question?
I think it's kind of a couple of questions. One is this assessment, is that going to be public information? Or
yes, it is.
Okay. And I'm curious, what are the different categories? I heard someone say that it's got like 45 different recommendations. So I'm kind of curious if there are categories, more kind of towards what is priority in that. So if you guys can speak to that, that'd be great.
For sure.
David, I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to take that. A couple of things, just for your information, for anybody else that might be listening. So our studies actually there are like 13 different chapters within the studies, and each of them effectively looks at a different operational portion of the police department. So there's a section on internal affairs, there's a section on policies, there's a section on leadership, and there's a section on patrol and one on investigations. So as we go through the process, we identify recommendations that correspond to each of those chapters. We then group those recommendations by criticality, really. And so within the report, you'll find that there were some really rather critical recommendations that we provided to the police department actually while the report was in process. And then we have what we would call less critical and not non-critical recommendations in those categories. We also, if you want to talk about kind of generalized themes, if you will, there's really kind of 5 different areas. The first one is policing strategies, organization, culture, and leadership. The second one is communication, and that's internal and external communication. The next one is staffing, recruiting, retention, and related workload issues. The next one is technology, and the last one is investigations. So effectively, out of those recommendations, basically each of them falls into one of those larger general areas. And to your other point, in terms of prioritization, even though we identified a level of criticality, part of the strategic planning process that we will be engaging with the police department and the city in coming weeks, we'll take a fresh look at each of those recommendations and identify from some different perspectives what the city feels ought to be prioritized and why, and we'll then go through a process of establishing goals and objectives and steps to take to move those recommendations to resolution. So I know there's a lot of pieces there, but that's kind of how the categorization and that's how the categorization is done with the recommendations.
That answers my question. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the answer.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And David, just a reminder, this report is available on our website. The full report is available to all residents. Okay, we're going to move to the next caller. We have Lauren Weatherly. Hi, Lauren. Are you on?
I am. Hi.
Hi. What is your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I have read the report, and I mean, I had several things I kind of have reflections on the report. One part that I just wanted to read is there's a part of, and this is kind of speaking to the previous comments too. BerryDunn is confident that the steps the Northglenn Police Department has taken with regard to fair and impartial policing, social and procedural justice, relationship building, community policing, and to date, those efforts meet or exceed industry best practices. I think that's fantastic. And I also know, kind of to Joanne's point, that it's really tough to get at systemic issues, things like systemic racism, kind of within a report like this. So I really would like to see more robust efforts around sort of gathering some of that kind of data. But I want to go on because the next line in that quote that I was reading says, however, the current national landscape calls for industry reform and additional efforts to connect police agencies and the communities they serve. Community co-production policing is the model for this type of reform. And this is to Mitch's point that he was just making. So I'm curious what you see as the first steps there in terms of community co-production policing. It seems like a really complex, like robust, kind of huge change kind of a thing. But what do you see as like a timeline for building out this kind of a model, Chief or Commander Waltz? Like, what do you see as like the first steps for like moving towards this type of a model? If you could just speak to that a little bit.
I think Mitch can talk about it a little bit, and then we can talk about some of the things when we start doing our strategic planning and building that out, because that, again, with what's going on in our country right now, I think co-production policing has jumped to the top of that list. So again, there's a lot of stuff that we need to do, and again, it's building. Gerald mentioned earlier, on the call that he wants to be a part of that, and I know, and maybe with Joanne as well. I mean, so reaching out to the members of our community of color and see if we can get them interested in joining us, and then building that out together. Mitch, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Let me just, and I know we're short on time here, but let me just give a couple of things. First of all, the first step in moving that model forward is to establish a community co-production policing board, and that board then becomes kind of the executive body that oversees the implementation of community co-production policing. To your point, it can be very complex, and there are a lot of different pieces and parts and nuances to it. But the good news is that you can start it rather quickly, and you can grow it incrementally as your needs are, or as your demands dictate, and as you go through that process, as you come to realize, well, gee, here's another area or another pathway, which is what we call them. So you can go into take those pathways and expand the number of pathways or expand the depth of them. But really at the heart of this, what we're suggesting, and it's why we've had conversations with the city about this, there have been a lot of efforts that have been tried throughout the country over the last decade for sure, to try to address some of these negative outcomes and marginalized populations and so forth. And a lot of these things just haven't, a lot of those things just have not produced the kind of results that we're hoping for. So getting the community involved in a much more robust way can improve that. And in terms of timing, again, like I said, we're going to be working with the city over the next few weeks, talking about what next steps they want to take. And if the city chooses to go down that path, we're certainly willing to be a contributing partner to that, and we'll work with the police department and the city to move that initiative forward.
That's great. Just a quick follow-up. Is that separate but connected to like the conversations that City Council already started having about community oversight, a citizen oversight board, and question does that live within the police department, like this community co-policing board that you're speaking of? So sort of the first step piece of it, is it separate? Is it two separate things? And where does it live?
There's lots of details here, but let me say this.
Yeah.
The city council the city council is the executive body that decides how they're going to proceed. So I won't speak on their behalf, but what I will say is this: the community co-production policing board is made up of a representative group of community members and people from the police department who all sit at the same table and share and collaborate on the construction and production of policing within the community. It is a collaborative process as opposed to simply an input process, which is kind of more where things have been traditionally. So this does substantially change that format. Ultimately, there are many different ways that board could be constructed, and if in fact the council chooses to go, we will explore those different opportunities with them, and they'll make that final determination.
Lauren, this is City Manager Geyer. I just wanted to add, so on August 12th, that study session that we're going to hold, that's where Mitch will be part of that conversation. Myself and City Attorney Corey Hoffman, will be providing council with options on how they can move forward. So, the conversations that have been had up to this point, we've taken all of that input, and we're in the process of developing options that council can then provide feedback on, as well as we'll talk about what additional community input council would like to see as we move forward down this path.
Okay, no, that's super helpful, because I think it sounds like what you're saying is that the co-produced sort of board is sort of like prevention rather than treatment. It's really starting from the ground up and putting practices into place that are developed in conversation. And I think that's great. I also think that there's still a place for an entity that lives separate from the police department that is more along the lines of the oversight. That seems like a conversation that's already started that could get going quickly, that can also play a role in this larger system that we're talking about. So yeah, I think that would be helpful. The only other thing I wanted to say is during that, I listened to the study session last week and I read the report. I was very interested in that discussion about roles that community-based staff can play kind of in the community in policing. I heard this point about officers being overburdened, overworked, that the department is understaffed. And it just seemed like there's a real opportunity to look to an approach that sort of builds up that role of community-based non-sworn staff with skill sets around, mental health, homelessness, addiction, things like that. And I just wanted to advocate for looking at the STAR program that Denver is currently working on, because I feel like that could be an interesting model that could be informative. But that's the only other thing I wanted to kind of share, just sort of that reflection from kind of my takeaways, is that I think there's a really huge opportunity to kind of build out a different model with staff that can be first responders to incidents or calls that don't necessarily need a police officer to be the first responder to. So I felt really encouraged by that conversation, and I hope that conversation continues to be a robust one.
So Lauren, just real quickly, just so you know, that's one of the discussion points that can come out of the co-production model, which is looking at the nature and structure of calls for service and services the police department's provided, and whether or not those should be shifted. So that can be a part of the discussion.
Great.
Okay, thank you so much, Lauren. We appreciate you calling in. Okay, our next caller is London. London, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, what is your question?
So I'm an accountant, and I've been looking at an article that was published just this month, and it compared the city budgets for 25 municipalities in Colorado, and of those municipalities. 13 of them were in the Denver metro area, and Northglenn ranked third for the highest police budget out of the total city budget. So I wanted to ask what percentage and dollar value is the city's budget for the police?
Can you clarify how did we rank? You kind of got muffled there, so can you clarify that for me, please?
Yeah, so it ranked what percentage of total city budget was spent on their police expenditures, and Northglenn was ranked third after, I believe, Centennial and Lakewood.
Okay. This is City Manager Geyer. So our general fund budget is approximately about $27 million for 2020. And the general fund budget is our operating budget. And of that budget, $11 million roughly is dedicated to the police department. So that includes personnel, equipment, supplies, everything that it takes to run the police department. For a community our size, just being under 40,000 residents, I believe, I'd be interested in reading that article because I did not see that article. We have to be careful in terms of what's apples to apples and apples to oranges. For our size community, I can tell you in my experience, our budget is appropriate. It's the largest operating budget within the city of Northglenn, and that's not uncommon for a city our size to have the police budget be one of the largest, and then typically you see public works budgets being second to police. So it's if you want to email me that article, if you don't mind, I'd be happy to dig into it more, and my email address, I can give that to you right now.
Okay, go ahead.
It's Geyer, G as in George, EYER, at northglenn.org. Another piece of information in terms of our budget at $11 million for the police department, we have a complement of 73 sworn officers, and that includes the chief and command staff. So, that's a big portion of that $11 million is the staffing aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help, or did you need have any follow-up questions on that?
Actually, my follow-up question was asked by the last caller, so that one was answered. I did have one other question that I wanted to ask, though, which was this report is a good start. Do you think you will continue to do like accountability audits on the police reports that are done, and just police accountability reports on things like spending, and reports to make sure things like systemic racism doesn't continue to be a problem, that training is actually successful, to make sure that nothing happens, just to make sure that people are held accountable for their actions and choices?
I believe Chief May is going to answer your question.
Hi, London. One of the things that we did, one of the recommendations right out of, from BerryDunn was, hey, so we ended up getting a software program that tracks all use of force, it tracks all complaints, and then it categorizes all of that too. So again, looking at different races that we're going to make sure we categorize, and also so again, all that's going to be categorized, all that's going to be put in place, and then we can run reports off of that. So again, that's we're trying to be as transparent as possible, and again, that's that accountability piece that we really want to make sure that we're accountable to our community.
So following up with that, I have two questions. Are you only looking at use of force reports? Because systemic racism can show up outside of use of force. It can show up with ignoring police reports. It can show up with dismissing police reports that are accusing people of things, and you say, well, I don't think that's a problem, so I'm not going to follow up on this report. Those can be issues. And then who's auditing the software to make sure that the software is catching these issues? Like, is there a person looking at the software to make sure that the software is doing its job properly? Because software doesn't always do the job properly.
Chief, maybe you can talk about our complaint process a little bit more in depth about how that works, and I think that'll get to more of what London's asking you about.
So one of the things with, again, making sure that we put our phone number where people can call in and make complaints, and when that's taken, it's put into, it's called Blue Team software, and it's that tracking software. And with the reports and stuff, the reports and everything are reviewed by supervisors. Again, and if there's something that's not quite right with the use of force, that's also reviewed by a commander, and then if it rises to the level, then our internal affairs group. So again, there's several eyes that will be on that, on those reports to try to catch some of that. Commander Waltz has actually put a lot of that together, and she has a couple things to add.
I just want to let you know, we have multiple ways that people can actually file complaints with us as well. So besides the phone, we have the online reporting system, so that comes in and we look at that and track that as well. As the chief was mentioning, we have the new software solution that is going to help us, and I'm responsible for overseeing that, so I am watching the system to make sure that the information is getting inputted correctly, and then making sure that it is capturing all the data that we want it to, so that we can put those reports out and make sure the community is seeing what we're doing. So it has a transparency piece to it that we'll be able to pull out reports, put those out for the people in the public. So again, it's not just use of force complaints. It is any complaint that comes in will be reviewed. It's taken through the entire process and through several levels to make sure that everything's being done on it correctly.
Okay, that's really nice to hear that, you're following up with the software and that it's more than just the use of force complaints. One suggestion I would like to make is the problem with systemic racism and systemic issues is the system is the problem. So if the only people looking at this issue are within the system, that might not catch the problem. So perhaps the board could be involved in these issues and have oversight there to help make sure that if there are systemic issues, there's an outside pair of eyes looking at that.
That's a good suggestion, London, and that's part of why the city needs to undergo training at all staff levels as well as the council level. So we're starting from a similar place. The Government Alliance on Race and Equity is our partner moving forward, and they are skilled, and so they're our primary third party, not necessarily from an auditing perspective at this point, but from the perspective of they're helping us figure out what tools and training we need to get in place. There are certain types of data that we haven't worked with historically, not right or wrong, just we haven't. And so to Chief's earlier comments, there's things that we want to work with data in a different, more intentional way to help inform us and really bring to light if there's issues in certain areas that we need to address. And so you're completely spot on in your comment about systemic racism, and so this is new work that the city has not done before, and so that's to say that I have staff members at all different levels who have gone through various diversity trainings. However, in talking about systemic racism, we need to be undergoing anti-oppression training and really engaging in the trainings that are going to help us as the government, the city government, as the system, the organization, to figure out how to identify what barriers have been created, whether consciously or unconsciously, and how we address that. And so that speaks to that racial equity tool that I mentioned earlier in our conversation that we need to develop. And my hope is, as city manager, that once we get that developed, we can do a full inventory of all our different city programs and any new type of program that we advance in the city and bring forward for support at the council level. We have looked at that program through this racial equity lens, and so that we don't unintentionally create new racial disparities.
Okay, and
so
I think all of these ideas sound... Oh, sorry.
No, I was just to say that's something we have not yet developed, but I have the support of council to do that work, and we'll be starting that this fall. It's going to take some time to do that work.
Of course.
And this is going to be an ongoing process. It's not something that, a year from now I can say, we've achieved this. We're going to do everything we can here in Northglenn and hope that we're a role model for organizations and communities around us, that they also take on this work and collectively, as a whole, we do the right thing.
Right. I think all of that sounds like a really great start. I do have a question. You guys have brought up several different boards that are either been created or are in the process of being created. How do we find information on how to get involved with these boards?
Right. The Diversity, Inclusivity, and Social Equity Board information is in our August Connection newsletter that probably went to the post office today, Diana, or tomorrow. So you'll be receiving that. That information will be on the website. The Police Oversight Board that's been talked about has not yet formally been created, so that's under discussion. So there's an opportunity and future opportunities to be part of helping shape what that looks like. That next council discussion is August 12th. So if you go to the City Council web page, you can listen in on that conversation on August 12th. But the Diversity, Inclusivity, and Social Equity Board, the application will be available on August 11th. I believe that's the commitment we made, and that'll be on the website. We'll also be mailing out a postcard to every household in Northglenn to encourage participation on that board. And when in doubt, if you can't find something, feel free to reach out to me or another staff member. We'll make sure we get you the information you need.
We'll also promote on social media, and so 2 direct mailers to people's house. It'll be on social media. It'll be on our website. And we're also utilizing community groups and faith partners to really try to get the word out as broadly as we can in the community.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for calling in, Linda. Have a great night.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we are moving on. Next caller, David Garcia. David Garcia, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Hi, what is your question?
Well, first of all, thank you for this forum. It's been informative. I have 3 questions regarding hiring.
Okay.
One is the educational qualifications for hiring a policeman, and specifically, is any psychological testing done?
Yeah, David, that's a great question. So at a minimum, to get hired at Northglenn, you at least have to have a high school diploma or equivalent, but most that we hire at least have a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree. And again, when they go through the hiring, we start off kind of like with a written, kind of like not really a total exam, but testing their ability to write. Then we do a physical fitness test. Then we do an integrity interview. If they pass that, or an oral board, then we do an integrity interview that's very in-depth on their past and their history. And then there's the psychological is very in-depth. We use a firm that just does police psychology, psych reports, and there's a pre-psych, which is probably 300 questions, and then they sit down with a psychologist, and they go over that, and then if they get past that, they do a polygraph, just substantiating all the stuff that we learned through the background. If there's anything else that popped up, then they then they come and do an interview with me. And then if I think they're a fit, we'll give them a conditional, or human resources will give them a conditional job offer, and then we send them back for a post-psych that goes even in more in depth on their past, and then we do a medical. And then,
that's good.
Yeah, so
it'd be interesting to know how many failed. Second question is any background checks done to be sure that you're not hiring bad cops that came from another police department where they were fired or kicked off the force because of improper actions?
You bet. So if we get an application that was a police officer somewhere else, we even go in, we go to that department, we do an in-depth background. We make sure we see their personnel file. We look at, any complaints, anything that came in. We look for those things if of behavior that we don't want to bring here to this, to our organization. Again, we're trying to take our department to the next level. That's why this 360 assessment was completed. So again, that best practices when it comes to recruitment and doing backgrounds, but we really look into those. And if they have files that we've run into where they have sealed files, but if they don't allow us access to them, they're automatically dumped from our process.
Good. Third question is, can you give us a diversity breakdown on the force, as far as women, men, white minorities, etc.?
What's the gender breakdown?
Yeah, so we have Asian or Pacific Islander, we have 2, we have 3 black officers, we have 7 Hispanic officers, and 65 white officers. And then I don't have, where's the, and I think currently we have 73 officers, and we currently have, I'm trying to count them in my head right now. I believe it's 13 female officers, 12 or 13.
13 of the 67?
Yeah, and the percentages is at 2.6 Asian or Pacific Islander, 3.9% are black, 9.1% are Hispanic, and 84% white.
That's quite a disparity in whites.
Yeah, so help me with recruitment. That's again, our recruiting numbers are way down, and so trying to get the word out. Send as many people to me as you can. So we're going to start another process in August. So we currently have 5 vacant positions that I would like to hire by the end of the year, and I would love to diversify my department even more.
Okay, Chief. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question. Great question.
Thank you. All right, next caller is Jim. Jim, are you on the line?
Yes.
Hi, what is your question?
Just wondering if the city had any plans to shift some of the responsibilities from police officers to professionals in homeless and people with mental illnesses, where it would relieve the police department members for other more critical police tasks.
This is City Manager Geyer. Thanks for your question. So one of the things that we've are using as a pilot program of sorts through COVID-19, we've received federal funding through Adams County CARES Act dollars. And so we've created a community resource navigator position, and I call it a pilot program because we're going to be assessing the use of this position in addressing homelessness issues that we have in Northglenn, as well as other issues as a result of COVID-19 impacts on families and individuals as a whole in our community. So we're using this position as a way to really see what level of interaction this position can have with our community members and we'll use that data to help make a determination of what we're going to ask for in the 2021 budget, whether or not we need a full-time position. Right now, this position is a 20-hour-a-week position, and again, we're funding it through CARES Act funds. This individual started last Thursday, and I can tell you that she has been very busy already, and it's been great because based on concerns that we've gotten from community members or concerns or opportunities that Judge Amanda Belhash has brought forward, this navigator is being responsive, and the whole goal is to help have this individual provide individuals and families a warm hand and get connected with the services, whether at the county or the state level, that they need to get connected with, and provide case management. So the individual we hired is getting a master's in social work and has, great background and experience in working with individuals throughout the community. So we're hopeful that we can use this position as a way to gauge what more we need to do, even beyond homelessness. Does that help answer your question, or do you have a follow-up?
Yes, no, that answered my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for calling in. So we have made it to the end of our time this evening, and we know that went by really quickly, and we were not able to answer all of the questions. So I just want to remind everyone that your city council members, our city manager, our chief of police, and his staff, we are all here for you, and we are ready to take your calls and your emails and get your feedback so that we can continue to move our city forward. I want to thank Mitch and Fred from BerryDunn for being with us tonight and for their work on the assessment. I'd like to thank City Manager Geyer, Chief May, and Commander Waltz for being with us tonight, and for all of the residents that took time out of their evening to spend it with us. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you soon.